If you post on social media, you are a storyteller telling your own story to the world. And I am joined today by the best, bar none, social media storyteller that I know. And she's going to talk about how you can make long-lasting, real human connections with other people you've never met through social media. I'm Craig Colby. This is Narrative Drivetime. And I am joined today by Natasha McKenty. She is a TV show host. She is a journalist. And she is a communication expert. And Natasha, first of all, thank you for joining me today. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for having me.
And can you just tell people a little bit about what you do in these many roles you have? What are you doing professionally these days?
These days, I write for a local news publication in Waterloo region. So I started off writing news, and they realized, I had this niche where I was always trying to tell the good news, trying to find the inspiring story. And so I ended up getting my own column, and it's called Rooted, where I go, out of my way to find those people that maybe other news outlets aren't talking about, and digging deep into their story and their past, and finding out, some of the hurdles they faced and what they're doing today. And usually it's something pretty big for the region that they don't really want the accolades for. So they're surprised that I've reached out to tell their story. So it's a win-win for me. It feels good to be able to do it, and I'm inspired by these people. And then I also was hosting a show called In Studio, which was a local magazine show. And that was pretty much giving a spotlight to, anyone and everyone who's newsworthy in the region. But again, I always really enjoyed those good news, inspiring, motivational stories. And that's what I started doing on my own on my social media channels. And I mean, I think it's doing well.
I think it's doing really well. And why don't I just start by sharing with people a little bit of what we're talking about. And what I'm going to read is a post you had from February 1, where you were 6 months into a new job. Here's what you said. Fear doesn't stop you from dying. It stops you from living. The last 6 months of my life have been life-changing. I started a job in an industry that literally scared me into hysterics. Aerophobia. This job, while balancing two others, meant I would be away from my home more than my children had experienced. And earlier this month, we faced the fear of losing one of the most important people in my life, my mom. Dark times are no strangers. We have been there. The reason these past few months feel so transformative for me, for the first time, I've been able to take these struggles and use them to turn my life around. A few years ago, I had a pretty severe anxiety attack on a plane. I swore I would never step onto a plane again. A couple of years ago, I took a risk and became a full-time student. Being a full-time mom and student meant I also took a step back from my extended family. I struggled to keep a social life, and I had constant anxiety that I was going to fail at everything. Fear was ruining my life. Why am I sharing this? Here I am, working for pilots and aviation leaders, writing for an aviation trade publication. Say what? Here I am, flying with my children. Here I am, working mom, and my children still feel loved. Fear isn't there to protect us. It's robbing us. Take the job you think you're ready for. If you can, call your parents. Fly, live. Turbulence won't kill us. It's only there to remind us that if we ride it out, the destination is so worth it. What kind of reaction did you get to that post?
I think in my regular life, I'm really good at putting on a facade that I'm a lot tougher than I am. So when I am vulnerable on social media, I usually hear from, people who've been in my life for decades, like yourself, who say, wow, that was super vulnerable, and I would have never guessed that about you. And so that's when I know I've made an impact, and it's worth it to me. I think that, we all struggle with some degree of imposter syndrome, where we achieve something, but we don't feel worth it. Or maybe we haven't worked hard enough, or we aren't smart enough, or, we turn down an opportunity because we don't see ourselves able to do it because of fear or, motherhood, or whatever the priorities are that you're afraid that you won't be able to juggle. And so the reason that I like to share these stories and be super vulnerable on my social media feeds is because I want others to feel inspired. I want someone else to read that and go, oh my gosh, that's totally me. And you know what? Maybe I can do it.
Well, I've personally found that in reading some of your feeds. You talked in one about how much you hated your looks when you were younger, which I think people will have a hard time believing. But a lot of people related that, how much you struggled with weight. And, I related to that. My weight goes up and down. When I'm good, I feel great about myself. When I don't, I feel terrible about myself. Kind of get a little self-loathing going. And I look at every picture to see if my fat neck is showing. I think everybody relates to those things. What do you think the value of that vulnerability is?
I think, and I mean, we remember a time before social media where some of, I spent a good deal of my high school career hiding my flaws, wearing more clothes than I should be wearing on a hot day because I didn't want anyone to see what I thought would take away my value, which when you're at that age, looks are big, and they still continue to be, unfortunately. So we didn't have social media. And so now it's, we can change our looks through social media. We can use filters. We can, cut out whatever parts of our body we don't like and become a facade. And so I fell for that for a while because I am extremely insecure. I suffer horribly with, anxiety and fear of people seeing what I really am inside. And that includes, the shape of my body. I have frizzy hair. I'm aging now. I don't want anybody to see any of these things. So I fell into that trap for a long time on social media where I would use the filters. I would post my perfect family. Nothing ever goes wrong in this house. Certain angles made my house look better than it was. And so you would fixate on these types of things. And then I found, actually through doing some of my interviews, when people were vulnerable with me, I wanted to be more vulnerable than I was, and it felt good. So I feel like a lot of people are disconnecting from social media right now because they don't want to compare themselves anymore. They don't want to see the falsity of the untruths of what people share. So they take a step back. And so I would like to encourage people to, just be more choosy of what you're looking at, and look for feeds like my own, where there's honesty and integrity. And, I will be vulnerable, and I will talk about, my experience with bulimia, or, the children I've lost, or the loss of a parent. But then I'll also mix that in with good news stories. So yes, I'm real, I'm vulnerable, but there's ways that we can get past these hurdles, and this is how we do it.
Well, I'm going to get to that balance later, because I think that's actually a really important point. But in the pre-interview, when we were talking, I mentioned that, Facebook is evil. I don't think Facebook is evil. I think the people running it may need to re-examine their priorities a little bit. Mm-hmm. But you said when you hear that, it hurts you. Mm-hmm. What do you think the value of social media is?
I think it's a place where, yes, there's a ton of negativity, and, the cyberbullying, which I experience with my teenage daughter right now, is awful. Because of the bravery that it exudes because you're behind a screen, but it also allows you to find your tribe. And so like-minded people who are suffering from the same, issues or anxieties that you're going through, you can connect with those people. And I personally think, I've formed relationships with some on social media they don't even live in Canada oftentimes, who understand me more than my own neighbor does. And I think it's empathy, right? Like, you're able to reach out to these people who have gone through either what you've gone through, or they're experiencing what you're experiencing. And they will private message you after you create a vulnerable post and say, I've been there, I've experienced that, and you're not alone. And so it's therapeutic to know that we're in this together. And that's not something you would be able to do without social media. I know, like I said, in my own social circles growing up, and even in the neighborhood that I live in, I don't share any of the stuff that I'm sharing on social media because that's too vulnerable. But when I know, that I have access to people who get it, who will benefit from me sharing, and who can better their lives because of a story that I told, that's not possible without social media. So that's why I find it disheartening, because yes, there is a dark side, but there's also a very positive side to social media.
Yeah, people are canceling their social media account because of the social dilemma, which is worth seeing, but also worth keeping in perspective too. And just to get back to sort of a main theme of what you're talking about, the vulnerability, what I don't think people realize is what a show of strength it is to be vulnerable. And, my experience on social media has been when I've put the things out there that have been painful to me, painful experiences, people have responded way more than to triumphs. And also when you've put out the painful experiences, when the triumph comes, people seem more invested in that and in you.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your childhood background, because I think that feeds into why you've made the decisions you've made on social media.
So I was born to teenage parents, very young. My father was 16. My mother was 18. They grew up together as childhood friends. We lived in Petawawa, Ontario, so very small. And so my parents were never really together. So I didn't have a normal childhood. I had two siblings that were put up for adoption when I was 3.5. So I was the eldest of the three children. And so I didn't meet them again until I was 19 years old. So I spent, my entire life dreaming about what I could have had, who I could have been, had I have had a normal family life. So I bounced between parents. I lived with aunts. I lived with my grandmother. I lived with friends. I was all over the place because, and I don't hold it against my parents. They were just way too young to be parents. So that in me developed a lot of insecurities. And I think that's why I became a storyteller, is because I, being an only child, would sit in my room and create stories that I could live through, or I would align myself with kids whose lives I wish I had. And so I hid a lot of that when I started working at CTV, and, I was 20 and I was like, this is it. I'm going to be huge in this industry, and no one's going to know where I came from. And I'm just going to build this new person. And I did that for, probably about 10 years, and then realized people are drawn to who I really am, not who I wish I was. And so I started sharing a lot of those stories. And, like I said, people who have been around me for 10 years had no idea I'd gone through that. And I was more personable. I was more likable because I was real. And it also created a lot of what I went through bouncing. I was a new kid at least 10 times moving between schools. And so I became, the master of reinventing myself and being, more assertive, even though I was very shy, and, creating my own story every time I walked into a new setting. And so that also developed a lot of insecurity for me, and fear of what people thought of me. And I often assumed what was going on in other people's heads without even knowing, they don't like me. Why would they like me? I'm a misfit. My life is weird compared to everyone else's. And so along the way of developing my anxieties and my insecurities, I was also developing empathy. And so I may not have experienced every possible situation that could go wrong in your childhood. I know I had it good, although it was not great. I can empathize with people who've gone through pain and fear and isolation, and who've, developed exterior shell and got through it, and then created some kind of good out of the bad. So I love those stories. I love telling those stories because I live through those stories, and I am motivated by those stories. And I find that's just where I belong. And I feel so good when I'm able to, find that story and tell it and have it do well on social media.
Well, and that's one of the things that I found when I, in my life, have experienced that real shattering pain that kind of breaks who you are. It's almost like there's this river running underneath the surface of the world, this river of pain that, you always knew it was there, but now you can hear it running. Mm-hmm. And when you see it running through someone else, you feel it and experience it in a completely different way. Mm-hmm. And again, you've been great about sharing that. When did you decide first to become so open about this?
You know what? I think a lot changed for me and my outlook when my father passed away, because he was only 49 years old. I was a week away from turning 50. I was, pregnant, and I was about to have a child. And so I don't know, a lot changed in me when all of that happened. And I decided it was time. You know, I mean, my father was 49, his father was 52, his mother was 53, and my aunt was 56. So so now suddenly I have a family that not only is messed up, also dies very young. So I think it was time for me to put the pedal to the metal and figure out what was I put here to do? What is the legacy that I want to leave behind? And that's when I started really focusing on what I thought my superpower was. And so to me, it was empathy, and it was the drive to tell these stories and to give a platform for people who may not necessarily have been given one previously and deserved it. And makes just, you know, ordinary people who are living ordinary lives feel special and feel like what they do in life matters, and it can create change and, you know, maybe even motivate those people who are kind of just not sure which path to take that path now.
Well, I mean, you've tapped into something that my favorite artist is known for, Bruce Springsteen, is about the heroism of ordinary life. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people necessarily see their own heroism, but they may relate to it when they see it in other people. I want to read just one more thing here that you wrote. This was again related to your job, and I'm going to put up the picture that came with this post. And here's what you wrote. This is from March 23. We're now into the pandemic. This picture, he said, "Why do I feel like we just visited Papa's grave? Wise beyond her years. Not that aviation will die, but she recognized the power of the moment. This generation will be different than any we've seen before. The current situation changes everything. Maybe we're better off. More empathy, more gratitude, less vanity. Time will tell." And the hashtags are Speak Up, Stronger Together. So tell me about that situation.
The job, or?
Yeah, the job.
Okay. So like I said, I had a horrible fear of flying, which I think my father passed down to me. He never traveled anywhere from his fears. And the last time I was on a plane, I had the worst anxiety attack I've ever had in my life. And it was coming back from Mexico, celebrating my 10-year wedding anniversary. And I swore I'd never get on a plane again. Anyways, I went back to school. I took public relations, and I knew that I was interested in honing my skills in social media and using my broadcasting background. And I ended up in a job interview at an airport. And I remember telling my friends, what a joke, like if they knew how terrified I am, they would never hire me. So I was hired, and it was working for a flight school, which is located at our local airport. And specifically, it was, they wanted someone to come in and tell the stories that weren't being told. And I loved it. Oh my gosh, I fell head over heels with these people.
And that was your dream job. You've described that as your dream job.
I did. I mean, it sounds so funny coming out of my mouth, but it's true. It was. And I identified with these people, and their passion, I lived it. And I fell in love with aviation alongside of them. It's so much more than just flying a plane. So anyways, of course, a pandemic rolls in 6 months into that job and grounds every plane on the planet, which I told myself was my fault for falling in love with aviation. I had to have done that somehow. So we went to, you know, I was put on furlough or laid off, and we went to visit, and it was solemn. It was very sad because, you know, this was a hub. This was one of the busiest airports in Canada because of the flight school, and nothing was happening. Nothing was moving, and it was solemn, but it also felt like a metamorphosis to me. Like this was an opportunity to become less vain, to realize what matters in life, and just to take a moment and have, you know, a moment of silence and reflection. And okay, so this is our reset. This is how we start over. And what will we do with this second chance with our lives? And I feel like, you know, especially for my kids who live in this age that is so vain and materialistic, it is so different from my childhood, that this was a good opportunity to self-reflect and to be forced into, you know, you stay at home more with your family and figure out what is actually important and how you will use this experience to better your life and to better other lives going forward.
Well, some of the best things that have ever happened in my life have happened after I didn't get what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
And they force you into a spot where you have to think about, who are you now and what are you going to be,
Mm-hmm.
and who got you the things you were before. And I remember we had a conversation. We had a chat online just after that, and you were very open about how scared you were about your career after this because you'd finally found something you loved so much.
Well,
And that was very real.
Yeah.
We could all relate to that.
Well, I mean, you take a risk. You're a mother of 3 kids. You're middle aged. You go back to school for 2 years. That's a huge risk. And while I'm at school, there's a massive strike, and I almost lose the entire year I've invested into this 2-year program. And I get through that. And then, I go through weeks of applying for jobs and trying to figure out where I belong now. And I finally find that place, and I feel like I belong, and I'm making an impact. And I'm just like, I come home from work and I'm still working because I love it so much. And, then everything's grounded, and you just go, why? What is the purpose? I have to find the purpose in this to keep me going.
I want to read another one of your posts, and I'm going to put up the picture that went with this post because it's quite an interesting contrast. And I love that you put up this picture with this post. This is from July 7th. This is in quotation marks, something that you had received. "Go ahead and block me. It's time your network and others know how fake you are." Unquotes. Offensive name calling is 42%. Another quote. "I'm going to tell everyone what an evil, horrible person you are. You don't deserve your success." End of quote. Spreading false rumors is 32%. Another quote. "Hey, beautiful, send me a picture of you right now." End of quote. Receiving explicit messages and image they didn't ask for, 25%. Physical percent threats are 16%. Having explicit images shared without their consent, 7%. The stats represent how many people surveyed have been the recipient of that type of bullying on social media, according to a 2018 research study. The quotes are actual messages I have received. "I let them tear me down. I let myself believe they're garbage. I let them make me feel afraid. Then I let them inspire me. Cyberbullying is our next pandemic. Take away their power. It's time for my network and others to stand up and speak out. Stay tuned." And I think this picture is important because that is not somebody who's intimidated. You took we talked about this in the preview. You took somebody who very clearly really bullied you your whole life, and you outed it all and turned it into a chance to share with people. What kind of response did you get to that?
I had a very positive response, including, from our local police services and, other leaders in the community. And I think this person had done this to me silently through Messenger because that's how it worked in high school as well. It was just a fear-based relationship. Nothing ever came of it, but I might do this to you. I will call your boss. I will tell everybody who follows you, you're a fake and you don't deserve this. And I lived with these messages for about a week, and I was in tears. I was terrified. What if she could take everything away from me? What if I am a fraud? What if I am a fake? What if I don't deserve any of this? And then one night, like I said, I became motivated, and I decided to take her words and instead of hiding them like she was doing and hiding behind a direct message, putting it out there on my page. And I mean, my profile is public, so she can see that I did that. And it did really well because I had, a lot of people who either commented on that post or who either private messaged me and said, I have had all of those things happen to me, not just on social media, also in my workplace and, amongst peers. And thank you for putting that out there. And the reason I chose the photo is because I did feel like I looked a lot tougher than I really am. And I wanted that. I wanted to show that exterior. That's how I am on the outside. But on the inside, everything you say to me matters to me, and it hurts me. And I am human, and I don't deserve this. And anybody who's cyberbullied doesn't, and it doesn't really accomplish anything. And like I said, my teenage daughter is going through it right now too. And I've handled it the same way I handled that. I screenshot it, I send it to a family member. So how would you feel if they knew that you said that? Don't say it then. I don't understand why we take such pleasure in tearing people down. And that's not what my account is about. I don't even know how I could open myself up to being cyberbullied on my account, because it's good news stories. And that has nothing to do with how well my life is, right? I'm not successful. I'm not famous. I'm not rich. I don't know what you think you have to take from me. There's really nothing. You know, I'm vulnerable. I'm out there. Everybody knows everything.
Well, yeah, you are. And that may be one of the things that bothers her, is she's not able to do that. It's a fine line to walk, posting things that are vulnerable and telling these stories, because you run into people online who put all the sob stories out, and it's hard to get a steady diet of that, because that's feel sorry for me. Mm-hmm. And then you get other people who are just put the inspiration stuff, which are, again, aren't I great? Mm. And you walk a really nice fine line of, I'm telling you what's going on with me, but I'm not giving into it. How do you define that line? How do you do that?
For me, I feel like it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to tell the truth, as long as there's a call to action at the end, or something that allows you to feel like there's a solution, there's a positive ending. If all I ever did was talk about all the bad things that happened in my life, there's no resolution to that. There's no power in that. So when you can share all of that vulnerability and then say, but this is how I get past it. And yes, I struggle. Yes, sometimes I trip and fall, because I'm human, and that's allowed. But at the end of the day, I'm okay, and you're going to be okay too, you know, and we can find power in our weakness and use that to motivate us, to find our passion in life, to help others, to use our empathy, to use our superpowers that we've been given, that we didn't even know were gifts, but they are.
And obviously you've made some lifelong friendships from this. Can you give us one example of somebody you are friends with that you haven't met?
I guess the first person that comes to mind when you say that is someone that I met online, because we both, my first daughter was stillborn. So we met because of content that I was posting in a group that I had joined. And she had also lost her first child. And we really bonded. She lives in California. We've never met. That was, oh my gosh, 16 years ago. And I feel like I've been in her home. I feel like, you know, I know her family, I know her children, and we communicate on a regular basis. We remember each other's anniversaries of when we lost our children, and we're there to support each other. And we get that type of loss never goes away for a parent, no matter how many viable children you bring into this world. And I don't know, you know, like I said, I sometimes feel like I am closer with a person like that than I am to my own neighbor. Which could be weird. But it's therapy, and it's feeling like you belong, and you're going to get through this, and you're going to be okay. And someone else in the world identifies with what you've gone through.
Yeah, it's all about connection. There's a gentleman that I know, a Vietnam War vet in Texas. And during the pandemic, I started wearing a different hat every day and posting those, and people started to get in on it. By the time I was done, 125 hats later, I didn't know how long it was going to end or how many hats I had. He sent me a note and said how much it meant to him to see that every day. And he told me, "You're the best friend I've never met." And it's a real connection. Again, I feel like he's a real, an actual friend, even though we've never met each other. I've got two more things I want to do here. The first one, I want to show a picture and read another one of your posts. This is not the picture with the post, but I think it's reflective of it. This is the kind of activity that you were doing before we got in this pandemic mess. And here is a post you put on July 26th. I look at memories so differently now. I imagine how good it would feel to go back to traveling unrestricted. I wonder how quickly we'll be able to return to a carefree life, who will lose in the process, and how we'll get past the social anxiety distances caused. Hashtag up yours COVID-19. What do you think we're going to get out of all of this?
You know, they say what doesn't kill us makes us stronger. And I think we have a real opportunity to figure out where our values are, what matters to us, and to become stronger, to become more motivated. Like a situation like that where I'm terrified of heights. I tried to back out. Even, midway climbing down that, I thought, out of body experience, this is not actually happening to me. But like the pandemic, you'll look back on what you were able to accomplish when you were in a lockdown situation, when you were unemployed, when you were faced with, losing a job, losing your home, whatever it is that, we're going through. And it's going to be tough. It's going to build empathy and enterprise and passion. And when we come out of this, we'll know exactly where we belong.
What do you think people should know about using social media?
I feel like, again, same with the analogy with the pandemic, we find out that relationships matter a lot more than we thought they did. We used to think it was how big our house was and our job title or what our kids' extracurricular activities are and how they're the top of the gymnastics class or whatever. But what we're realizing now is it's just so basic. It's the relationships that are going to get us through this. And it's the same with social media. I think we have to be careful who we choose to follow and what we choose to digest online. And when we choose the right feeds and the right leaders to follow, we can become motivated and passionate and reminded that each and every one of us is powerful and we can create change in the world, no matter how small it is, even if it's just supporting someone online and saying, I get it. And thank you for sharing your story.
And your story can make a difference to somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
I want to share one more picture. For all the vulnerability you've shown, you do have a really happy life at home that you could put up for everyone. That's a picture of you and your husband, who I think is the coolest guy ever. I've said you that to you many times. This is the image you could put out there every day for everyone to see, and everyone would believe it just from the riches you have in your family. And I think it's really brave of you to push that aside and say, this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to be, and take it or leave it. This is my reality, and how much other people have benefited from that. So hats off to you. That is some ace storytelling that isn't getting a big contract anywhere. It isn't going on TV, but it makes a difference in people's lives every day. And yours is one of the Facebook feeds that I always look for because I know there's going to be real life in it.
Well, thank you for saying that. I really appreciate it.
Well, it is the absolute truth. And that is all we've got for today on Narrative Drive Time. Thank you so much, Natasha. I know a lot of people got a lot out of this, and I hope it will encourage people to be brave with their stories, because it's a no deposit, no return world. If you put in, you always get back more. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much.